Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hill Podcast, where we chat through different philosophical ideas, different psychology ideas, different biology ideas. Today, well, first off, Happy New Year. I'm going to take these off really quick. Today, we're going to focus a little bit on more of an open chat here, because a lot of times when I do my podcast, it's very guided. It's very, I don't want to say like mechanical, but things are very planned out. I usually follow PowerPoint and stuff, but today I just kind of want to like chat openly and just kind of explore some ideas with you guys. And so I've been sitting here thinking a lot. Relationships, specifically romantic relationships. Like it's something that we all like go after in Western society, in society at large, wherever you are in the world, really. Like we all want some kind of romantic relationship. And I'm sitting here and I'm like trying to understand, like, first off, like why is this something that we're all after? Like it seems to be like a primary driver for all human beings. And it's just like, I feel like if we follow things unconsciously and we don't ask why, it's like, well, are you really human at that point if you're not trying to figure out why it is that you're doing what you're doing? I love doing that. And that's like, it's a big part of this show. Trying to figure out like why we do what we do as human beings. Cause it really is interesting. Like you sit here and ask like, why am I going to spend hours and hours and hours thinking about this human being? It's like, what even is love? Like, why do we do all this stuff? So join me today as we sit and try to parse out some of these ideas. A lot of today's ideas are going to come from Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving, and it's this book right here. Really good book. Kind of sheds some light on the current state of things in Western society, I guess, as they were when Erich Fromm was alive. So he was around in the 1940s. He was a psychoanalyst, sociologist, psychologist, talented individual. Really some powerful thoughts that he had. And he poses a lot of different questions and kind of critiques of how we conceptualize love, how we conceptualize our romantic relationships. Really powerful stuff that he kind of gets into. And so I guess to kind of like just dive right in, like let's start right here and just like pose ourselves this question. And like you guys can feel free to think along with me, because that's kind of what this is. Like, just join me for the thinking process, right? So what is the purpose of our relationships? And more specifically, what is the purpose of our romantic relationships in our lives? And I'm typing this stuff out because it helps me like think when I type things out, and kind of, and you're going to see this on my screen too, which is cool. I'm trying to like integrate these two things together. So what is the purpose of romantic relationships? And so I feel like the first thing that comes to mind, and what we usually get, is for procreation. So the production of children. And I'm not saying that that's like not a noble thing. I think like when I first think about that, I'm like, it almost feels like you're just like offloading everything onto the next generation. Like you didn't do anything great with your life, so you're going to have kids and just pass everything on to the next generation to try and do something great. And like, I'm not saying that having kids in itself isn't something that's very fulfilling, because a lot of people do report that like raising kids is one of the most fulfilling things that they've ever done in their lives. I'm not trying to take away from that by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also wondering if like, when you have kids, like, it distracts, I don't want to say distracts, but like when you have kids, you're not focused on you anymore. By nature of that relationship, you have this little fleshling, this little small vulnerable human that is completely dependent on you. You have to care for this little being, and if that's the case, it's like you can't focus on you and your wants, your desires, your skill sets, what you can bring to the world anymore. Instead, you're focused on taking care of this little human. So maybe that's one direction we could take this. So the purpose of romantic relationships is procreation and the production of Kids. What else? Romantic relationships show us things about ourselves. And what might that be? So let's think about it. If you're going to be in a relationship with somebody else, in order for that to succeed, you have to be well acquainted with your own flaws in order for the relationship to flourish and be successful. And if you're not well acquainted with your flaws, well, it's interesting how that works in relationships. It seems to be that your flaws get put on the spotlight because it usually ends up becoming a point of conflict in the relationship. Human beings have a really interesting way of like bringing things out of each other, especially in romantic relationships. It's like if you're going to be intimate with somebody, like they're going to get to know all parts of you. And that includes the dark side. So Carl Jung called this the shadow self, and relationships have an interesting way of bringing out the shadow self, which is, it's pretty cool if you think about it. Because like for the most part in relationships, like no stone goes unturned. And even in relationships where if things are potentially hidden from the significant other, it's like it comes up in other ways. Like if you don't tell your partner something directly, like it somehow manages to come up in conflict where the individual says they're not bothered by something, but deep down they actually are. And somehow that tends to come up in conflict, which is really interesting. What else? A lot of times we enter into relationships, specifically romantic relationships, to feel wanted, to feel desired, to feel love. And, you know, right off the bat, just me saying that, it's like, it sounds like, I don't know, we as human beings are so like, what's the word, insecure, that we need somebody else to validate our being and our existence in some ways. It feels nice to have somebody like look at you and be like, you know, you're good. That thing that you're doing, this existence that you're living, it's good. We are pretty insecure. I think we as human beings, we're so vulnerable. We could get hurt at any point in time. We could have our health taken away from us. And I think having a significant other kind of acts as a shield against that, which is really cool. And that's what makes relationships pretty powerful. When you feel like what you're doing is validated by another human being, because like existence itself is so chaotic. It's like we go through day-to-day life and we're all not 100% sure what we're doing. So it's a powerful thing to have another human being be like, hey, you're something. You're really special. Like I really like the way that you live your life. Like that's, maybe it's not insecurity, but maybe part of being a human being. Maybe it actually is insecurity, and relationships help us form some kind of safety net in this chaos and this insecurity of existence. And just like thinking out loud here, I'm trying to like spitball all the ideas of what is the purpose of a romantic relationship. To solve the loneliness issue, that's a big one. That just came to my mind. It's like, think about this modern era. We're all really atomized. We're all really separate from each other, it feels like. I feel like it's just so interesting nowadays how the more connected we become via technology, the less connected we are able to become in person. I feel like when I look around nowadays and like, let's say I go to the supermarket, I look at people and like nobody's looking up. Everybody's like looking down at the ground or like refuses to make eye contact. It's like we're all ashamed of each other. It's like, I wonder why that is. Like, what is it that we're all scared about right now? We all, as human beings, have so much love to give each other. And I feel like there is so much good in this world. And we just need to tap into that, like focus on the good aspects of ourselves. And like we've lost as a society, as human beings, because of this technology. I feel like we've lost a lot of our ability to connect in person. And maybe part of it is like this glamour culture in Instagram, in like Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, where it's like you only see the good stuff, and you look around and it's like people just living their mundane lives. It's not that glamorous, and we all look around and we're like ashamed that we're not living that life presently. And it's like, well, you know, not everything is the highlight reel that you see on these social media apps. It's terrible how it's conditioned us. And I'm not going to sit here and like bash on technology and say that there's no good to it. There are definitely beautiful aspects where people can share their art. People can connect the way that, you know, social media was initially intended. It's definitely got a good side to it too. So I'm not going to sit here and bash it. We have to just be aware of some of the downsides. And I think definitely as it stands now, as a society, we are seeing a lot of the downsides of what technology does to us, especially with regards to romantic relationships. My goodness. Which brings me to a potential critique that Erich Fromm has, which is, are romantic relationships simply the exchange of value? I'm going to write this one out. And I ask that because if you look at I guess like the manosphere, if you look at like the pickup artist culture, if you look at like modern feminism, if you look at like red pill culture too, a lot of it is just like find the highest value person that you can, and that value that person brings to your life is based off of looks, it's based off of money, it's based off of status. And this is kind of sad, you know, when you think about it. It's not based off of like this person's personality. It's not based off of the genuine connection that you build with somebody. It's so superficial and it's so sad. It's like, again, I feel like part of this can be from social media, where like you look at these celebrities and they only date people who have a lot of money, who have a lot of status, and it's like, well, what's to be said about the rest of society that doesn't have all those things? Is romance all about the exchange of value? Is that all it is? It sounds very superficial, and I feel like we as human beings have a deeper desire than just this, I don't know, this exchange of value, this exchange of like a high value woman and a high value man. And it's like, what makes a high value man? Is it just his money? Is it just his status? Is it just how many women he can get? And for a woman, is it just her beauty? Is it just like how she carries herself in public, how many followers she has on Instagram? It's like these things, like, I guess I understand. Like if I were to sit here and break it down, it's like now we have a metric to see how popular somebody is. And like, we're social creatures. We want to be around people who are also popular. But at the same time, it's like, it's interesting what happens to these people when they gain this much fame. And if that becomes the sole focus of their lives. Now, some people handle it very well. Like some people that get to the top echelons of society, let's say like the Marcus Aurelius types who, you know, have reached the top, know how to handle all their wealth, know how to handle all this power. But a lot of times that power, that status, that wealth, that being a high value person becomes the focus of your life. And it ends up being an existence that can be pretty empty when you're focused on money and focused on fame, focused on status, focused on how many women, or for a woman, focused on how many high value men you can get. It's like, you know, what's next? It's like once you've attained, let's say we're talking about romantic relationships, once you've attained like this high value man or this high value woman, it's like, well, what's next? You know, you're gonna get that, and it's like, what else? it doesn't sound very fulfilling once you've gotten to that stage. Like, you're gonna want to build something with this person. It's not enough to just, I guess, win that race. Like, what are you gonna do? Just move on to the next person now that you've gotten your high value individual, this exchange of value concept. It's like, we want to ascend. And again, I love referring to Maslow's hierarchy. We want to ascend up to the next tier, which is moving towards something a little bit more self actualizing. Like, my unique makeup as an individual, your unique makeup as an individual. You want to build that unique makeup together in a relationship, not just acquire this person because it makes you look good, because that's just, you're just using that person. Like, that's not love. That doesn't sound like love to me. Like, you're just exchanging value. Because you're a high value man, you go after a high value woman, and you two get into a relationship together. And it's like, if you don't think beyond that, it's going to be so, like, so empty. So we want to ascend up Maslow's hierarchy. We want to find ways that we can grow to reach our highest potential. And of course, that involves you on your own figuring out, like, what are your natural inclinations? Like, what are your natural skills as a human being? What do you lean towards? How does your mind think? You got to ask yourself all these questions so you can ultimately figure out what it is that you want out of your life. And that's tough, you know. It takes a lot of soul searching. And that's why I love going out into nature and just sitting there thinking about this stuff. But of course, you got to put it into practice, right? If you're going to sit there and think about these things forever, make sure you take time to also act on what it is that you've thought about. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about Erich Fromm's critiques of modern society's views towards romantic relationships. So Erich Fromm basically stated this: people see the problem of love primarily as that of being loved, rather than that of loving, of one's capacity to love. So his critique seems to be that we're so worried about getting love for ourselves that we're not even remotely thinking of how can we be better lovers to other people. And that's interesting, because when you flip the script and you become somebody who is so concerned with becoming an individual that's better at loving, that ultimately, if everybody thought that way, I think the dating market would be so different right now. If everybody went into the dating market thinking, how can I be the best lover possible? How can I give as much of myself to this person as possible when I'm going into trying to find the right person for me? That's a whole mindset shift. It's not, how can I find this super attractive person to love me, to fill this void? Instead, it's, how can I go in, better myself to the best point possible, to then give somebody so much love that it's transformative. Erich Fromm also said, people think of the problem of love as that of an object rather than a skill. In other words, they believe that love is simple, but to find the right person to love or be loved by is difficult. So, on average, everybody thinks that your ability to love somebody else isn't a difficult thing to do. This is his critique. And I think it's a really valid critique, because we just assume that, you know, you find somebody that's attractive and you fall madly in love with them. Once you sit with that person long enough, things are just naturally going to click and you fall madly in love, and that's that. There's no work that has to be done. I mean, I'm sure people know that it's work that has to be done, but I think the assumption is that it's not going to have to be so conscious. It's not going to have to be like almost planned out. Like, it's just like you find this person that's attractive and you spend time with them and things just work out. And Erich Fromm's critique is, it's not that simple. It's a skill more than anything else, is kind of the assertion here. Erich Fromm is saying, just like any other skill, to love has to be practiced. If you want to get good at loving, if you want to get good at being in a romantic relationship, you got to practice it. You got to sit there and like write it out. How can I love this person better? How can I better meet their needs? Get to know this person. Like, what do they want in their life? How can you help them reach that? That's so important. And it's like, instead of you thinking of you and what this person can do for you, what can I do for this person? That's love right there, ladies and gentlemen. That's something pretty special. And if you have a relationship where both people are thinking that way, you guys will reach some really special heights. Like, that's a good place to be. And Erich Fromm's, he has a lot of different assertions throughout his book. Again, the book is The Art of Loving. Love is an active concept. Excuse me, I just burped. He's saying it is the act of giving. It isn't the act of expecting. The more you expect, the more you drain your partner, and the more you give, the more you can fill your partner up with love. And it's interesting how that works, because it's almost like in you giving of yourself to your partner, what you end up finding is that you yourself feel whole too. There are so many people who could use more love in this world, and this concept of like love being an active skill, not being something passive that you just feel as an emotion because you're attracted to this person. I think that's huge. That's a really important assertion, and I actually kind of agree with Erich Fromm on that. And he kind of talks about how falling in love isn't a long-lasting concept. Falling in love is like, you look at somebody and you get into this honeymoon phase. It's like, well, what happens after that honeymoon phase? And again, he's asserting that it requires you to continue developing that skill, for you to sit down with your partner and keep those lines of communication open, to keep pushing towards something that can reach self-actualization. It's like, once that spice fades, which it will, like, you guys are going to spend a lot of time together in romantic relationships, like that spice of like, I wonder what he's up to, like, I wonder what he's doing. It's like, you see this person day in and day out, you know exactly what their routine is. It's like that part fades, that spiciness fades. You see this person fail, you see this person's character, their flaws. Again, relationships have a really interesting way of revealing all the flaws. It's like, once you get to that stage and you're beyond the honeymoon, it's like, that's where I think true love actually happens. Because it's like, it's not just this feel good thing anymore. It's actually like, it requires work. And I think that's what defines love, is how much work it requires. So Erich Fromm outlined 4 tenets that are really important in his book. The first one is care. And that is, to be specific, care for your partner's growth. And so what does that mean? Being genuinely concerned that your partner is moving onward and upward in their day-to-day life. Seeing them progress, seeing them find what it is that they love, and like genuinely being invested in it. And you have to do that in a careful way, right? So when you're with your partner, if they're not moving onward and upward, don't berate them. Don't tell them how much they suck. Don't judge them. Because, again, we're all going through stuff in our lives, and it's hard to move forward day in and day out. Some days you just don't feel like it. Some days you can't progress. And that's okay. You have to love your partner through that, because life isn't a linear upward trek. Like, we're all struggling, you know? So that's one of the key tenets for Erich Fromm, was growth. Being concerned with your partner's growth is super important if you're going to cultivate a romantic relationship based in love. The next one he talks about is responsibility. So that is meeting the needs of your partner. And if you're going to meet the needs of your partner, again, this is going to be tied up with knowledge, which is his 4th assertion in his key tenets for romantic relationships. If you are aware of your partner's needs, you should strive to meet them. Now, again, this is also tied up with his third tenet, which is respect. Don't abuse or don't have your partner. How do we put this? Your partner can easily abuse the fact that you should be meeting their needs. And so if your partner respects you, though, they're not going to exploit this. And Erich Fromm is really explicit with this. He's like, just because your partner has needs doesn't mean that they should abuse that. That's messed up. So having a nice balance there is really important. But I think it's important to acknowledge your partner's needs. So if your partner is super active, like, try engaging your partner in that fashion. Or if your partner is not so active and your partner likes to relax, like, come together and find a compromise there. Like, how can you guys support each other best? Because a lot of relationship is compromise. You can't always do what you want to do, and your partner can't always do what they want to do. It's got to be like a happy medium, because it's two people coming together to operate kind of to meet each other's unique needs. It's tough. And to touch on that third tenet that Erich Fromm really dives into, it's respect. So love should be the desire for growth of their partner, of your partner, as they are, not as you would want them to be. And this is a tough one. I think I personally struggle with this one. Like, I want to see my partner progress, and everybody wants to see their partner continue to grow, but not in the way that you personally would want them to grow. Just because you think it would be a good idea for your partner to, let's say, go to the gym more often because it'd be healthy for them, or to drink more water, or to think happier thoughts, all of those things. It's like, sure, they sound great, like when you think of them in your mind, but is that what your partner wants to do? Can you love them in a way that they think is best? And let them lead that conversation. If you really respect your partner, then you respect their autonomy. You respect their desires. And sure, you have ideas of what might be best in their lives. And we're great as human beings at critiquing others without looking at ourselves and our own flaws. So love your partner and help them grow in the way that they want to grow. Don't push your ideas on them. And just because you see where they're faltering, don't be so quick to point them out every time. You gotta love them through that, and that's a huge part of authentic love. And of course, in order to respect your partner, you really should know them in the best way possible. Like, take time to figure out what are their deepest desires, what are their deepest fears, what do they dislike doing. In order to really support somebody, you have to have knowledge of them. And so Erich Fromm talks all throughout his book about how important this knowledge is. Like, don't just get to know your partner on this superficial level. Like, spend time figuring out their deepest desires, because that's ultimately going to help your relationship flourish. I think Erich Fromm really does a good job at kind of breaking down some of the societal challenges that we have surrounding love. And he kind of takes a big old poo-poo on the idea that couples are a team working towards the same exact goal. His thinking is that we are two unique individuals, and this whole idea of being on a team working towards the same goal just doesn't work. And I get it. Like, we have our own desires. We are autonomous beings. We are reaching for different things, and just because we're in a relationship, we shouldn't smother each other for some common goal that we both agree on, because ultimately that's going to lead to resentment. The aim should be commitment towards unique, individualized accomplishments. Ultimately, I think that love is definitely an action. Love is an art, like Erich Fromm said. Love is a constant set of efforts that you're putting into your romantic relationships. And so I think it's definitely something that shouldn't go without questioning. Why is it that we participate in these relationships? And we can really learn a lot from romantic relationships. We can learn a lot about the nature of life. And really, romantic relationships can be beautiful, and they can be really damaging too. So step into it. If you are looking for one at this stage of your life, step into it with an inquisitive mind. Go after that knowledge. Understand how to love. Understand the mechanics of relationships. Be curious, because going into it unwittingly, searching for these emotions of like feeling good when you're with a partner and feeling like attractive and feeling like you're looking for just some high value person, like in the pickup artist community where they're just going after the hottest females, or for women just going after the hottest, or like I should say the highest value men. It's like, sure, those things are nice, but it's like it's not ultimately that fulfilling. I think love goes so much further beyond that. So going after love with an inquisitive mind, going after love with an open heart, I think can make such a huge difference nowadays. And so I'm going to wrap this one up and call it for today. Thank you for joining me on the Hill Podcast, and I will see you guys in the next one.